Hello, welcome back. My name is Amber, and today I want to share a really brief practice on how to help release the pelvic floor muscles. When I started getting into this, studying about pelvic health, I was so surprised to find out that more than 40% of yoga practitioners alone have over-recruited pelvic floor muscles. And this also goes for athletes, for people that are doing many different types of exercises, and it has to do with the way that we exercise, the postures that we hold, trauma that we've experienced, stress that we have in our life. So there's many variables that contribute, but one thing's for certain, many of us need to learn how to relax the pelvic floor muscles. And so today I'm just offering a really gentle and brief practice on how to do that. And one of the main things to keep in mind is if we remember that the pelvic floor muscles stretch from the pubic bone to the tailbone to the two sitting bones on the other underside of the pelvis, then anytime we're widening the sitting bones apart, in particular, we're having a nice stretch or release to the pelvic floor. And we can achieve that a lot by internal rotations of our hips. And so we're going to be doing a lot of that through the practice today. All right, let's get going. So we're going to sit in Virasana. Now, Virasana itself is having the feet out by your sides, the soles of the feet upwards, and having your sitting bones sit right onto the floor. But that's probably a little bit challenging for many people. So you can take a block instead, and you can just lift your seat up and place the block right under you. You could also use two blocks if you wanted to stack two blocks up together. I do recommend using a block because it gives you more support rather than sitting on a bolster. So we want to make sure that we have the soles of the feet are pointed upwards. Sometimes you have to roll the calves out of the way a little bit. And we're sitting on the sitting bones themselves. So even this position is already giving us a slight internal rotation of the thighs, which you can feel coming from the hips. And that is going to give a little stretch to the pelvic floor. So we're going to sit here together and take several breaths. And I invite you to close the eyes and exhale everything out. And on the next breath in, allow yourself to arrive, to land in your body. And starting to feel your own positioning, so we can feel our weight distributed evenly on the two sitting bones. We know we have a neutral pelvis. If it were like a bowl of water, no water spilling forward and no water spilling backwards. And then we start to lengthen the spine, draw the lower ribs in so we have a neutral rib cage over a neutral pelvis. Lengthening all the way through the crown of the head, softening the tops of the shoulders. We can feel the steadiness of the back body and a softness of the front body. And by that I mean starting to relax the forehead, behind the eyes, the jaw. We know that the jaw and the pelvis have an incredible connection. So if we can really soften and relax the muscles of the jaw, that encourages the muscles of the pelvis, particularly the pelvic floor, to do the same. And now start to bring your attention to the breath. And with each inhale, feeling this nice expansion of the rib cage, almost like the opening of an umbrella in all directions. And as you exhale, feeling the rib cage returning to neutral. You may also notice a slight rise and fall of the belly with each breath. And from the earlier videos, you'll remember that the pelvic floor and the respiratory diaphragm are moving in unison as we breathe, particularly with this full rib cage breath. So if we bring our attention all the way down to the pelvic floor and visualize the pelvic floor as this sheet of muscles running from the pubic bone to the two sitting bones to the tailbone. Simply, we could say it's shaped like a diamond. And we know this diamond sheet of muscles is oscillating with the breath. So even without you doing anything, as we inhale, those four corners of the diamond subtly spread. And as we exhale, they draw more together as the pelvic floor lifts back into place. So just picturing this natural movement of the pelvic floor. Without you doing anything, no effort involved. And before we come out of this position, just take some moments to sense and feel your pelvic floor releasing. So as if you could just breathe into the pelvis itself, spreading those four corners of the diamond apart, softening, allowing, noticing if you can feel any tension. Just allowing this softness, a letting go. Okay, and then opening the eyes as you're ready. Okay, and we'll continue from here. And one thing I want to say, when you're in this position, if your knees are really starting to bother you, you can always take a towel and roll it up right behind you and allow the tops of your toes to rest over the towel so that it allows your feet to be slightly angled upwards, okay? And that can relieve a little tension from the ankles, which can help at the knees as well. All right, so we're going to transition out of this pose and moving your block to the side. You can leave it towards the front of your mat. And we're just going to come back into a child's pose. So we're going to have the toes together and open the knees only as wide as your rib cage, so not too wide. As wide as your rib cage, and send your seat back to your heels. And then you can come forward. Now you may like to just rest on the forearms. You can have the elbows down and just rest your head into the palms. And we want to think of setting the sitting bones towards the heels. And notice if you're tucking the tailbone under, because it's that tucking action that is actually contracting and recruiting the pelvic floor. So we want to untuck, we want to release the pelvis and try to get the sitting bones towards the heels. And you can also use blocks if that's more supportive under your arms. And we're just going to rest here for a little bit. And for those of you who feel that you want to put the forehead all the way down, you can also release the forehead down. But we're trying to watch out for rounding through the low back. We want to keep the back nice and long, really lengthening through the tailbone to the back of the room, softening through the whole pelvis, and visualizing your breath reaching all the way down to the pelvic floor. Even feeling the breath arriving at the underside of the body. And just notice if you're holding any tension in the jaw, and also start to relax the jaw. Just feeling this overall softness coming through the body. Notice if you're starting to round it all through the low back, if the tailbone's starting to tuck under. Just give it a little bit more lengthening. Okay, and taking our last breath here. And then we're going to look forward at our hands and just coming on to all fours. So we're going to walk the knees under the hips and the shoulders over the wrist. Now, if you're having any wrist pain, you can always be on your fist. You can also use blocks if that's more helpful. If you have blocks, and you can have your forearms down to the blocks. Okay, either way that's comfortable for you. And so with the hands onto the floor, or however you're supporting yourself, we're going to isolate the pelvis and do pelvic rocks. So as we inhale, we're going to untuck the tailbone. Okay, you'll feel a little bit of an arch come to the low back, but really the movement's originating from the pelvis. And as you exhale, we're going to tuck the pelvis under, scooping it under. Okay, so we're just playing with that range of motion and synchronize your breath to the movement. So as we inhale, we're going to untuck, exhale to tuck. And just taking a few rounds with your breath. And what I want you to notice and feel is what's happening to your sitting bones. What do you feel happening with the position of your sitting bones? So when you inhale and untuck, where are they? As you exhale, where are they? And so if we start to think that the pelvic floor is attached to the sitting bones, one layer of muscles are attached to the sitting bones, so what do we think happens when we widen the sitting bones apart? And what happens when we draw the sitting bones together? Okay, and now we're going to return back to neutral, and then just take it side to side, so out to the left, out to the right. So just rocking your hips side to side, getting into a little mobility. Okay, and then let's put it all together. So we're going to do some nice pelvic circles and really cultivate this feeling of softness, of release. Okay, and maybe you can even sense and feel the pelvic floor muscles or visualize how they're stretching. Okay, and then go the other way. Good, and coming back to center. Okay, have a neutral spine, so not allowing the spine to sag and shoulders to collapse. We're going to extend through the shoulders and have a nice neutral spine. And from here, going into cat-cow. So we're going to inhale to cat as we lift through the chest, untuck the tailbone, opening through the shoulders. Exhale as you press the mat away, tucking chin to chest, draw the pelvis under. So inhale to open. Exhale to round. And again, start to notice what is happening to the sitting bones. How are they changing position, even in this simple cat-cow posture? What happens as you inhale and you widen the sitting bones apart? How does that feel? And when you exhale, the sitting bones draw together. Okay, use your breath. Breathe all the way down into the pelvis, all the way to the pelvic floor. Okay, we're going to take one more round of these. And then coming to neutral, and we're going to tuck the toes under and go into downward facing dog. So we first spread the fingertips wide, press through the four corners of the palms, and then lift the knees off the mat and extend through the shoulders. Before we do anything, we really focus on the hands, spreading the fingertips wide, press into the palms, and then extend through the shoulders as you're pressing the mat away. Use that same extension to lengthen through the spine, so we're uncurling the tailbone, we're lengthening through the tailbone, trying to send the tailbone and the sacrum away from the shoulders. And see what happens if you give a little wider stance to your legs, and notice I have my knees bent and the heels lifted, and try to give a slight internal rotation of your upper thighs, and notice what happens to your sitting bones. Do they widen apart? And this is a great stretch for the pelvic floor. Just taking one more breath here. And then exhale to lower the knees down, flatten the feet. Inhale to cow. Exhale to cat. Again, inhale to cow. Tuck the toes. Exhale, downward facing dog. Keep the knees bent. Let's lengthen through the spine. Release through the tailbone. Inner rotation of the upper thighs. Taking one more full breath there. And before we come out, see what happens if you try to straighten the legs. But we're going to keep that internal rotation of the thighs. We keep the kneecaps lifted and the quadriceps engaged and try to spread the heels down towards the floor. And if they don't touch, that's okay. You could keep a slight bend to the knees. I want you to keep that internal rotation of the upper thighs. Keep widening the sitting bones apart. And on the exhale, we're going to lower the knees down. Okay, I'm going to take our blocks. So we have 2 blocks. Now, if you don't have blocks, you can do it on the mat. But if you have blocks, it gives a little added benefit. We want to make sure that the blocks don't move. So you have nice, steady blocks, stable blocks. Okay, we're going to spread our palms wide on the blocks and tuck the toes. And then go into downward facing dog. So we're going to lift the hips up. Okay, and keep the knees bent for a moment as well. Keep extending through the shoulders. Have that nice release of the tailbone and the sacrum moving away from the shoulders. And then see if you can start to straighten the legs down. And now maybe your heels rest towards the floor. So we keep the legs active. Keep that internal rotation of the upper thighs. And taking a few breaths here. Breathe. Full rib cage breath. Softening through the pelvic floor. Great, and then on the next exhale, we're going to lower the knees down. Hopefully that felt good on your shoulders as well. Okay, we're going to keep the blocks where they are. We're going to bring the left foot forward. So maybe your foot can go all the way in line with your blocks. Maybe you have it slightly out to the side, which is okay, or further behind. And then we're going to make pelvic circles. So just taking nice movement, choose a direction. Notice your jaw. Try to keep the jaw soft. Keep the pelvis soft. Okay, and notice if you have any tenderness or any pain coming up. We're just trying to release all the muscles through the inner groin. Giving a stretch to those muscles that are on the underside of the pelvis. Okay, change the direction. So sometimes with over-recruited pelvic floor, it's really just about releasing tension and just softening. But we have to train ourselves to do that again because it's as if the muscles have been in a constantly recruited state. Okay, so we're trying to soften and release. Good, and then return to neutral. And we're just going to bring that leg back and take the other leg out and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, it could feel different on this side. You can have over-recruited pelvic floor muscles on one side and under-recruited on another. You can have combinations. Okay, that gets a little bit more tricky to work with. And if you're really not sure, it's always best to go to a pelvic health PT if you can and have an assessment. It gives you great biofeedback to know how you are activating or releasing those muscles. Okay, change the direction if you haven't. Good. Okay, and then we're going to slow that down, come back to stationary. And now you can tuck your back toes, and we're also going to turn the blocks up to their highest setting, their highest position. And then you can just come on up to standing, and we're going to bring our legs out. And so I have my legs wider than my yoga mat, and I'm keeping a bend, and I'm turning the toes slightly out and the heels in. Okay, and then I'm just going to rock side to side. Okay, so just rocking side to side. And notice that I'm keeping my spine nice and long. I'm not here in this rounded position, so try to keep a nice tall spine. If blocks are not high enough for you, you could even use a chair or the edge of a couch. Okay, we're just moving side to side. And then we're just going to stay on one side. So we're going to stay on the, choose a side if you like. I'm going to stay there. And we try to stretch through the inner groin. You'll feel it coming all the way down the leg. Keep lengthening through the tailbone. So keep lengthening the tailbone out. Good, and then switch sides. Okay. And so an over-recruited pelvic floor can show up with so many different symptoms. And we can start to talk about those a little bit as we go through these postures. But just for a moment, notice your breath. Okay, and then we're going to come back to center. Okay, now one of my favorite postures, we're going to pivot the feet in a little bit. So you can still be as wide as your mat. Feet are still as wide as your yoga mat. And you're going to turn your toes in and the heels slightly out and give a little bend to the knees. Okay, walk the blocks in a bit so that your shoulders are almost over the wrist. Your hands can be slightly forward. And we want to keep a nice long spine. Now, feel that internal rotation of the upper thighs. It's like you're drawing the thighs inwards, okay? Internally rotate, which widens the sitting bones, lengthens the tailbone and the sacrum away from the shoulders. We're going to inhale here, lengthening all the way out through the crown, and exhale as we fold from the hips, not the waist. So we want to try to keep a nice long spine. If you're rounding here, then you want to stay up with the arms, okay? Otherwise, you can come down. Maybe you're keeping the palms to the blocks, or maybe you can keep the forearms down to the blocks as well. And we keep that micro action. We keep inhaling to lengthen, exhale as we fold, rotating internally from the upper thighs, widen the sitting bones apart, giving a nice stretch to the pelvic floor. Soften the head, relax the jaw, and just taking a few breaths here. A wonderful release for the pelvic floor. And so some of the things that you could experience with an over-recruited pelvic floor is sometimes urge incontinence, where you feel like you just have to make it to the toilet, and if someone's in there, oh, you might be in trouble, you really can't hold it in any longer. It's a sense of urgency. And sometimes even there's a sense of hesitation as well. You could also be experiencing pain on intercourse, pain inserting anything into the vagina. There can be tenderness around the sitting bones, even low back pain, teeth grinding. All these can be signs that there might be over-recruited pelvic floor. Okay, and from here, we're going to keep the action of the legs. Now place your hands to the blocks and walk your blocks out as far as you can in front of you. And this is going to give the effect of downward facing dog with the upper body. So we're going to let the head relax between the arms. Keep the action of the legs. My weight is more towards my heels. Okay, I have that internal rotation of the upper thighs, widening the sitting bones apart. Draw the lower ribs in, so make sure we're not flaring the chest. And just enjoy a few breaths here. Okay, and now looking forward at your blocks, you're going to walk your blocks to you first, and then you can heel toe pivot the feet in, and then just taking one knee down at a time. And we're going to cross the shins behind us and then come on over onto our seat. Now keep a block nearby because we're going to use it in just a moment. So we're going to slide onto the middle of our mat. Use your hands for support to work your way down and coming down to the floor. And you can rest with your spine touching the ground, but if you like, it can be sometimes nice to also give a little lift of the pelvic floor or of the pelvis. So we can take a block and just lift the sacrum up. Okay, and have the block under the sacrum, not under the low back, so have it under the sacrum. And then walk your feet wider than your hips and let the knees rest towards one another. Okay, so you let the knees lean in towards one another. They may not touch, that's okay. But what we really want is this nice constructive rest where we have a slight internal rotation of the hips. Okay, and then you can let your hands be next to you. The palms could be up if you like for a more restful position. And we're just going to take several breaths here. So maybe you like to close the eyes and allow the whole body to soften. Relaxing through the pelvis. And just visualizing the pelvic floor muscles fully relaxing. Having this nice full rib cage breath. And taking a few more moments here. Noticing if you're holding any tension in the jaw, in the throat, and just softening. Okay, and then as we start to transition from here, first we're just going to walk one leg out and see how that feels. And we're going to give a little stretch to the psoas, which a tight psoas can also sometimes be connected to over-recruited pelvic floor. So try it on one side. You can do one leg at a time, or for some of you, you may like to extend the legs all the way down. And we want to make sure we don't feel any compression at the low back, so we keep this nice opening of the front body. Taking a few breaths there. And you can always do one leg at a time if you like. Okay, and then we're going to bend one leg at a time to come back and press into the heels and just lifting up the sacrum off of the block. Okay, and you can draw the knees into the chest and rocking side to side a bit. And then also one of my favorites is going into a very gentle half happy baby pose. So placing one foot down to the floor, and then we're going to raise the other foot so the sole of the foot is pointed up towards the ceiling. And you can reach from the inside of the leg, wrap the hand around the outside, hold the outer edge of the foot. Now I keep my opposite hand on that hip point just to help keep the hip down. And you want to lengthen through the spine. So I really don't want the tailbone curling up and my pelvis tucking under. We're going to try to lengthen through the tailbone. Okay, lengthen through the crown of the head. Keep the sole of the foot pointing up and hopefully trying to get a 90-degree angle of the shin to the femur. Okay, and then as you inhale, we're going to breathe all the way down into the pelvis. And as you exhale, think of bringing that bent knee, bringing the knee towards the ground. Okay, you're going to feel this stretch coming through the groin, the inner groin of your of the leg that you're holding. And you're welcome to close the eyes and take a few breaths here. Excuse me. Just finding a nice, even flow of breath. Softening through the inner groin, relaxing through the pelvis. Just kind of noticing where you're holding any tension. And even visualizing your breath, breathing all the way down to the pelvic floor. And taking one more breath here. Then we're going to place that held ankle, we're going to just put it right behind the opposite knee. So it's like we're sitting in the figure 4 position. And this might be already a nice stretch for you, but if you like to take it further, you can thread the needle. So place one hand between the legs And then either clasping your fingers around the shin or even holding under the thigh as well. And we again want to think of lengthening through the spine, so trying to reach the tailbone down to the ground. And feeling this nice stretch through the glutes and around the piriformis muscle of the right, around the right hip and the right glute. If you even wanted to place a hand to the right knee, you also could. Okay, either way, wherever you can feel the stretch more. So we know that that muscle that goes around the glute area is also, the piriformis is also really connected to an over-recruited pelvic floor. Just taking a few breaths here. Okay, and then we're going to set the foot down, release the leg, and let's do the other side. So we're going to bend the left knee, reach to the inside, holding to the outside of the foot. Maybe your right hand goes to your right hip point. Inhale all the way down into the pelvis. Exhale as you try to soften and bring that knee towards the floor. Keep the sole of the foot directed upwards, lengthening through the tailbone, through the crown of the head. Relaxing the forehead, behind the eyes, the jaw. Just noticing whatever sensations are arising. And have this intention of softening, releasing. And then we're going to slowly release out and place that ankle right behind the opposite knee. Okay, and either just staying right here, or if you want a little further, you can thread the needle, clasping the fingers outside of the shin or behind the thigh. And try to keep this nice long spine, releasing the sacrum and the tailbone towards the floor, shoulders towards the floor. Nice full rib cage breaths. Softening, letting go. Okay, and then we're going to slowly release the leg down to the floor and take the leg off the right. Okay, and from here, you may like to just take a few windshield wipers to the sides, and you don't have to bring the knees all the way down unless you just really want to or it feels good. Okay, just taking a few rounds side to side. I do like to have my feet as wide as the yoga mat when I'm doing these. Just gives me a little bit more stretch over the psoas. Okay, and as you finish to your last side, we're going to bring the knees back up and we're going to go into Shavasana. So you're welcome to lie the legs all the way down. I happen to have a bolster here, so I'm going to try to position this right under my legs, and I like to give a little support just under my knees. Okay, and gives me a little bit more comfort in the Shavasana. It's also a nice way to help relax the pelvic floor. And if you had a bean bag of some kind, it also can be nice to just place it right over the low pelvis as a way to help you to soften and release a bit more. But you're welcome now to find your resting pose. And as you arrive, just allowing the eyes to close. And sinking into the body, into the earth. Relaxing all the muscles of the body, from the face all the way through the torso, the pelvis, and the legs. Allowing the front body to be received by the back body. And enjoying this rest for the next minute or so. And allowing your awareness to come back into the body. Letting your breath expand and travel through the body. And bringing slow movements to your fingers and toes. Maybe you like to stretch the arms over the head. And then as you exhale, we're going to release the arms down and just turn towards one side and slowly help yourself to come back to sitting. And if you have a bolster, you're welcome to sit on a bolster. If you have a block, you can use a block. And I'm just going to use the bolster since I have one here. Okay. And you can sit across the bolster and find a way to just soften and relax your position. And we're going to close with what's called reverse kegling. And this is where we just simply allow the pelvic floor to open and to release. Okay? And so imagine that we still have these four corners of the diamonds. We're going to use that as a cue. Okay, so allowing your eyes to close and just settling in with the breath. Allowing the breath to be nice and full. And then bringing the attention all the way down to the pelvic floor. Visualizing the four corners of the diamond. And as you inhale, we're going to spread the four corners of the diamond apart. So feel that relaxation coming, that release. And as you exhale, we just allow whatever's there, but we're not applying any effort. And so as we inhale, we fully spread the four corners of the diamond apart. As you exhale, we're just allowing. As you inhale, we're actively spreading, releasing the pelvic floor. As you exhale, we're just allowing. So there's no bearing down here. It's more of just allowing this release, fully opening, like the blooming of a flower. And as we exhale, just allowing whatever is there. Taking a few more rounds where each inhale, fully releasing, spreading the four corners of the diamond apart. And each exhale, just allowing. Okay, taking 2 or 3 more cycles of breath. And then we can let this visualization go and have a fully relaxed pelvic floor. And then just bringing one hand to your belly, one to your heart center. And we'll close with a gentle humming sound together, breathing in. And opening the eyes as you're ready. And I thank you for your practice. I hope that you're able to feel and experience complete relaxation of the pelvic floor.